Good morning, everyone. Morning, class. Anong buwan?
Morning, sir.
Sige, so let's have the attendance first. Okay, today is March 7. Sorry, March 7 na day. Sorry kaayo. Dali lang class ha. Okay, so today is March 7. So, may mga attendance sheet na to. Okay. S- Okay, two copies man, ma'am. Ay, wala ko na po. Two copies kung sa Karim. Okay. Sige, so let's have the attendance. Can you say present if your name is called? Today is March 7. Adlaw dong Wednesday. Nagkuhan man tato, no? Nag-quiz. Say, today is March 7. Okay, say present if your name is called, we'll have first name basis. Okay, Tessa.
Present, sir.
Dranuel. Dranuel. Si Dran.
Sir, present, sir.
Jessil. Jessil.
Present Alcalde Giselle, sir.
Grabe, kompleto yun si Jessil. Okay, Reina. 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 Palihok sa baso, Reina. Okay. Okay, next. Arkiza.
Present Arquiza, sir.
Sorry, Javelin. Si Javelin din eh. Margaret. Wag maski tawagan si Javelin ng Margaret. Okay, Josneer.
Present, sir.
John Paul.
Present, sir.
Aryan. Aryan. Okay, si Aryan. Ito, si Aryan yung kalito klase ba? Okay. Marnie. Marnie, wala pod. Wala pa. Rebecca.
Present, sir.
Okay. Erica.
Sir Cachero, present,
Sorry.
sir.
Lara, present. Erica is present as well. Jella.
Present, sir.
Mga, kung pa kayo mga voice no, mga, walk up like this. Lovely.
Present, sir.
Trisha.
Present, sir.
Dahil lang kasa. Okay. Anyway, let's have the next. Abigail.
Present, sir.
Kimberly.
Present, sir.
Fedis.
Present, sir.
Kani si Fedis, wag umata gini. Okay, Rosal.
Present, sir.
CJ.
Present, sir.
Kani wag umata po ni. Si Jefferolina.
Present, sir.
Tapos si pangalan si Jefferolina ay. Mura feeling ako kay combine ni pangalan sing mamang papa ba. Okay, Angel.
Present, sir.
Joy.
Present, sir.
Amisar.
Present, sir.
Estril.
Present, sir.
Rexy. Rexy. Tapos si Rexy. Jenny.
Present, sir.
Michael.
Present, sir.
French,
Present, sir.
Christine,
Present, sir.
Dulce,
Present, sir.
Cherel, Cherel, apa si Cherel? Glyza.
Present, sir.
Okay, so ang wala so far si Rexy, si Cherel, si Arian, si Marnie, o si Marnie. Okay. Anyway, so for this morning, we shall continue with our discussion. This time we'll have the divisions of I mean the second or the other division of the nervous system. We have the central nervous system, and also we will try to finish everything today. We will try to finish everything as much as possible. Okay, so anyway, wait lang class ha. Alright, so many. Wait lang class ha. Ah, okay, so nanay evaluation day for ano, schedule for evaluation. Mhm. Sa kuan students to no? Students ba to? Sa U-step. Faculty evaluation second sem. Okay, so anyway, let's proceed no. Medyo na Fika sa department. Yung last ha. Wait lang. So I'll just prepare the slides. Lang last ha. Wala, sana all Ma'am Merl. Straight ra ba tod ka Ma'am Merl dito no? Pila ka book estudyante mag-obserbahan ma'am? Alright, so allow me to share my slides, class. Okay, can you see the slides now? Kita na ba? Makita na ba, class?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Or, alright, so we are now on the functional anatomy of the brain. No. Well, of course, the brain is part of the central nervous system. No. Well, it's the other division because last time we focused on the structure of the neuron. Now, this time, let's have the functional anatomy of the brain. So, the brain basically has four regions. No? So, we have the cerebral hemispheres. Well, of course, we have the different lobes that comprise the cerebral hemispheres. So, as we all know, we have two hemispheres, the left and the right hemispheres, and then the one that connects well, of course, somewhat this is the part that connects the hemispheres together. We have the diencephalon. So the diencephalon actually contains most of the master glands like the pituitary, the hypothalamus, and other glands that are connected with the functions of the endocrine system. The third one is the brainstem, to which actually the brainstem and the cerebellum, which controls most of your involuntary functions, no, including your sleep wake cycles. So muna siya ang ato ang so most of our involuntary actions are controlled by these two. Okay, so let's have the cerebral hemispheres. Okay, so we have the left and the right. I have two hands, no? The left and the right. Okay, so lean and right. Okay, so it includes more than half the brain mass. No? Well, estimates will be ang mass ng brain will be from 1.2 to 1.4 kilograms. Medyo bugat, no? Okay, so the surface is made of ridges. So ang katong mga ridges katong na mga uh, kukakuan sa nature sa ridges, no, and then we also have grooves or the sulci or sulcus kung isa la sulci kung daghan, and then gyrus kung isa lang, gyri kung daghan. So fissures are deeper grooves. So deeper sulci are called grooves. No, I mean fissures. Sorry. So fissures are the deeper sulci. So lobes are named for the cranial bones that lie over them. So actually naatay upat. No, can you name at least one? It's sabi makaname at least one ka lobe of the four. Upat na sila ka lobes actually.
Frontal lobe, sir.
Frontal lobe. Okay, very good. Thank you, Dran. So we have the frontal lobe, and then the other are the parietal, the temporal, and the occipital. No? So, by the way, we'll also discuss here the different cranial nerves. No? Ato na yung mga katulagi akong gi-mention na nga na yung tawag nga mnemonics, no? Katong OOO. Okay. So we have here the now for the cerebral hemisphere, we have the main regions here. Now this is the layers that actually that are part of the cerebral both of the cerebral hemispheres, and some of them also provide protection. So the cortex is the superficial gray matter. When say superficial, it's the out one that is what we can see outside, and then we have the white matter and the basal nuclei, which are deep pockets of gray matter. So muna siya ang atong main region. So we have here, no. This is illustration showing the development of the brain from the time that you were conceived. So by during this time, estimately this is how your brain looks like. If the fetus is already 13 weeks old inside the mother's womb, no, muna hitsura niya. So we have the cerebral hemispheres here, which is shown here on top, and then we have the diencephalon, you have the midbrain, the cerebellum, the brainstem. And then in the adult brain, so we have this one. So, so the four parts, no, or the four main regions of the brain are clearly shown here. Now, as you can see, the brainstem will then extend to the spinal cord. So we have here the cerebral hemisphere, the diencephalon, the cerebellum, the brainstem. Right. So, what I would like you to do is to make sure that you are able to familiarize these different regions of the brain. No, I mean the different portions, no, that comprise the hemispheres. Not only the hemispheres, but also with the other different regions like the cerebellum, the brainstem, no. So actually itong brainstem na siya tulo ka parts, no. We have the we have the pons, the medulla oblongata, and kalimot ko ano isa. Anyway, we will have it later on. Okay, so we have here the gyrus, or well, of course the plural form is gyri. So we have the gyrus and the sulcus. So ang gyrus katong ridges katong mura bitong ay elevated portion, and then the sulcus is the ones that are ito na siya ano no na siya kini grooves, no, or katong martial folds, kumbaga folds. Then katong deeper folds, we call it the fissure. Okay, so makikita na to diri ang formation. So we have the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. Right. So compared here, this is how our brain looks like. The ano, no. Hmm. Hindi siya tanawon. Okay, anyway. So let's go now to the next part. Okay, so we have here the cortex and the basal nuclei. So I just want you to be familiar with their functions. Okay, now let's have a closer look at the diencephalon. So the diencephalon has three parts, no? So the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the limbic system, no? Turning my limbics into a bouquet. Ow. Okay. Kasi mga mga Bionella stands, no? And turning my limbics into a bouquet. Okay, so anyway, so we have the thalamus, the hypothalamus, no, and the limbic system. So these are the important parts of the diencephalon. Um, the thalamus, no, muna yung mga functions. So it relays sensory impulses to cerebral cortex. It releases impulses between the cerebral motor cortex and the lower motor centers, and it's involved in memory. No, um, ano ni siya, no? That's why if you are kanang bitaw ano, meaning if you are or if someone is experiencing kaning amnesia, most likely ang affected area ni isang thalamus ninyo. Okay? And also, although lahi po ni siya case sa stroke, no? Labi na kung na ay problema sa speech, most likely ang affected na is it's not the thalamus but it's the frontal lobe, particularly it's the part of the Broca's area. Anyway, natay video na later on. Okay, so we have the limbic system. So it includes the cerebral and diencephalon features. And actually, both ang thalamus gid din ninyo o ang inyong limbic system are affected when you are experiencing amnesia, no? Whether it's actually specific pag yun nga part sa brain, no, whether it's anterograde or retrograde amnesia. Isa gid sa akong mainumduman ng movies kay kaning, well, I'm not sure if you're fond of Bollywood movie kaning Gajini, wherein the main character, kato si Americano kay ang yaha na siya'y temporary I mean short-term memory loss. So meaning every 15 minutes mawala ang iyang memory, and it was triggered because of an event wherein yang gi-rescue ang yang girlfriend, and during that time kay the one who caused the life of his girlfriend and almost cost his life is si kaning Gajini. That's why then the title ng movie is Gajini, no? So kana siya kay naay part sa yang ulo nga Bollywood movie ni ni French, no? Ah, next one is Kana. Okay. So yes, no. So muna siya ang kuan kanang di ko kalimutan ang movie kay it really demonstrates no unsa ang behavior, no. Actually makita gyud ninyo sa movie nga ga-exhibit og kanang aggressive behavior pud si kay it was triggered by that event, no. Mo gyud na ang um murag dili gyud murag ka-trigger siya ba every time ma-remember niya tong event that almost cost his life. Kay murag pag murag gihapak siya very strong using an instrument, no, nga tong cushion si nakalimot ko sa kuan niya may tsura adto nga but ang iyang ulo may napuruhan sumuto siya nga affected kayo ang iyang memory. Alright, so yes, Dran, saan to Dran? Na kay
Sir,
question?
nakoy question sir ba kana
Mm,
bitang unsa nang kanang totoo bitaw or superstition
mm,
sa mga kwan sir kana bitaw mga utukan sir nga kanang even daw tinuod daw nga ang brain cells pa mag-stop siya og kanang multiply pag adult
mm.
na ka pero
Oo.
kung sige lang daw kuno ka og kanang study lugar sir kay mangita daw ang brain cells like mag-regenerate daw kuno na siya mo nang maka murag other way pod nga pa-develop unsay mo
Uh,
maingon ana sir.
from the name itself, from the term itself, gyud no kana dran ga-degenerate mong gud ang atuang atuang brain cells as we get older, no. So ang uban lang magud na kay the one that ganitong ginaingon nila to keep your memory sharp, it's actually kanang it actually strengthens our synapses, no. So remember last time ang atong discussion was focused on how the signal is transmitted from how the signal is transmitted from neuron to another. So it's just actually strengthening the strengthening the pag constantly man tud gina-exercise atong brain by doing activities that stimulate our brain functioning, dili ga ka-regenerate actually ang atong dili ga ka-regenerate ang atuang brain cells or neurons in our brain, but technically it's just strengthening the synaptic connections of our neurons. So wala gid tay mabuhatan na mag-degenerate kaya as we get older, no, part na gid na sa tuwang older development, no. So muna siya. So dili siya ano siya drum superstition mo gid siya. So it's just a matter of continuously exercising your brain. When you exercise your brain, you are actually strengthening the synaptic connections. So, ang processing din sa information, it becomes faster. And sometimes, no, kani pong mga, kaning mga, for example, like me, who has a tendency to be forgetful, no, um, wala mo na ni po ning panahon nga kailangan na po kumainom og og kaning gitawag nga memory plus. Memory plus gold. Okay, so let's have the next part. I don't know kung natubag ba na akong question ni Dan. Pero
Yes,
Dan,
sir. Thank
you
you,
can
sir.
also ask other questions later on. Okay, so anyway, so we have here the ang brainstem na to, class na siya upat ka parts. So we have the midbrain, the pons, the medulla oblongata, and the reticular formation. Oops. All right, so we have the midbrain, the pons, the medulla oblongata, and the reticular formation. So, ano daw diri? So, ang midbrain ninyo contains the visual and auditory reflex centers, no? So, contains sub by the way, no, kana bitaw nga to ang ano class kanang enlarge bitaw nga to ang or mag-dilate ang atong pupil. It's actually triggered by the reflexes in our midbrain, no? And then we also have the pons, no? For the pons, release information from the cerebrum to the cerebellum. It cooperates with the medullary centers to control respiratory rate and depth. So ang pons day ang naidako nga role in terms of your respiration, no? So kamo na siya control over your breathing, no? Okay, so isa mo kani, no? And then we have the medulla oblongata. So the medulla oblongata is it contain the nuclei controlling heart rate, blood vessel diameter. So ang kanang pag-dilate og pag-constrict sa iyong blood vessels are made possible by your medulla oblongata. Okay, respiratory rate, vomiting. Okay. So both pons and medulla oblongata have a role in your respiration. Okay? So also it relays sensory information to the cerebellum. And katong mga cranial nerves na dayon these are all found mostly in your brain stem. Okay? So also we have the reticular formation. So maintains cerebral cortical activities and filters out repetitive stimuli and helps regulate skeletal and visceral muscle activity. Okay, as for the cerebellum, it processes information from cerebral motor cortex, proprioceptors, and visual and equilibrium pathways. So siya ang maintain o ano. By the way, ang kaning bitang inyuhang class, one of the important roles of your ears, by the way, we will discuss it in special senses at the next chapter. One of the important functions of your ears, particularly your inner ear, is actually to keep yourself in balance. Mabitaw na nga kung kana bitaw magtuyok mo, kanang patuyokon mo, no? Dili pa sa gibote mo ha. kanang ipatuyok ka like you try to kanang magsakay bitaw mo kanang sa rides bitaw nga kanang malipong mo. It's because no ano man good ma-disturb man good ang kaning inyong cochlea, which contains fluids that keep you in a state of balance, no? So kanang feeling bitaw nga malipong mo or mahilo mo, it's because na naapektuhan ang naapektuhan ang inyong inner ear ana. And mo din na ang general feeling din yung malipong mo, it's because of the unbalanced state of the cochlea, which is connected to your cerebellum, no? So it maintains your equilibrium. Also, it provides instructions to cerebral motor cortex, um, and the subcortical motor centers result in smooth, coordinated skeletal muscle movements, and also it's responsible for proper balance and texture. Okay. Okay, so here in the cerebral cortex mo na ni ang iyang mga sensations no nga ka-feel. Um, um, these are it's the one that receives the impulses from the body sensory receptors such as pain, temperature, light, touch, and the left side of the primary somatic sensory area receives impulses from the right side and vice versa. Okay, so muna niya kung giyon kaganyan, no? Particularly the Broca's area is once this area is affected, no, you cannot kanang your ability to speak is greatly affected. So if you look at this one, the mga areas din, no, primarily our frontal lobe is in charge of most of the working memory. So we have here problem solving, language comprehension, no, speech language outlined by dashes, no. So we have here this one. We have the visual area here in the occipital lobe. The auditory area is here in the center, no. So again, no, part of it is to maintain your balance. Okay, so I just want you to be familiar with the functions of these different areas of your brain. Oh. So pre-central gyrus and the post-central gyrus. So nana siya sa tunga, no. All right. So these are the cerebral areas involved in the special senses such as the occipital lobe in the which is in charge of your visual na no, your visual senses. We have the auditory area and the olfactory area are found in the temporal lobe, particularly in the sa diencephalon na siya actually nga part, no. So we also have here the primary motor area. So we say motor, it is involved primarily in your movement. So it allows you to consciously move your skeletal muscles. Anterior to the central sulcus. When we say anterior, atubangan likod. Saan niya to ang anterior? Anterior? Saan yung anterior class? Review lang yan. Saan yung anterior? Atubangan likod. Anterior?
Atubangan, sir.
Okay, it's atubangan. Okay, thank you, French, no? So most motor neurons form a pyramidal tract which descends to the spinal cord. Okay? So, yes, that's how it looks like. Okay, so we have the Broca's area and it's usually found in the left hemisphere, no? So motor speech areas, speech area. So um in terms of mga kanimang tawag deaf, I mean mute, no. Um affected ang ilang Broca's area, no. Also other specialized areas, anterior association area, the frontal lobe, the posterior association area, and the posterior cortex in the speech area for sounding out words. All right. So anyway, to for us to get more understanding of this one, no, let's have this video. Ako lang sharing a video ninyo kay medyo ko na siya, no. Okay. All right. Medyo highly detailed siya. So I just would like you to carefully look at the details of the different regions as well as the different functions associated with these regions of your brain. Okay, so we will proceed na then later the diencephalon. So let's have this video. Allow me to share my screen. Okay, let me know if you can see the video na din, class, ha. Okay, can you see the video, class? Kita na ba?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
James was a healthy professional, a father of two. He had lots of friends, loved telling jokes, and played softball on Sundays. Then one day, at the age of 45, he suffered a stroke. He bounced back fairly quickly, with one major exception. He was no longer able to speak. The stroke damaged a specific area in the left hemisphere of his brain called Broca's area and left him with what's known as Broca's aphasia. Broca's area is partly responsible for the ability to produce and process language, and Broca's aphasia often leaves its sufferers with some ability ability to understand speech, but an inability to produce intelligible words. James could understand his wife when she asked if he wanted cereal for breakfast, but he could only respond by repeating the word to, although he could still intonate as though he were speaking a whole sentence. Then, after some time in therapy, something rather unexpected happened. James regained some ability to communicate through singing. Broca's aphasia can sometimes be treated by teaching patients to sing, because singing uses a different region of the brain, one that's on the right side and that's analogous to Broca's area on the left. So after some practice, James could sing words, and he eventually relearned how to talk by teaching the right side of his brain to speak rather than sing. Whether it's a stroke affecting your speech, a tumor destroying your memory, a concussion affecting your aggression, or that fateful iron rod that shot straight through Phineas Gage's skull, a lot of what we know about how the brain works has come through studying injuries to it. And what we've learned so far is that even though it looks like a 1.4 kilogram lump of gray congealed oatmeal, the brain is made up of super specific areas that have super specific functions. You might actually say the same thing about your brain that's sometimes said about politics. Everything is local. You'll remember that our nervous system is divided into two main networks that work in harmony. The central nervous system, consisting of your amazing brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, made up of the nerves coming out of that central nervous system. The central nervous system's main game is integrating the sensory information that the peripheral system collects from all over the body and responding to it by coordinating both conscious and unconscious activity. The sun is bright, so I'll shade my eyes. I'm hungry, so I'm calling the pizza man. The phone is ringing. Maybe I'll answer it. All these sensations, thoughts, and directions processed through this two-part system. It's the brain, of course, that sorts out all that sensory information and gives orders. It also carries out your most complex functions, like thinking and feeling and remembering. Meanwhile, your spinal cord conducts two-way signals between your brain and the rest of your body, while also governing basic muscle reflexes and patterns that don't need your brain's blessing to work. This is how a chicken can still run around even if the poor thing has been decapitated. Both your spinal cord and brain are made of fragile, jelly-like nervous tissue that is extremely susceptible to injury. So all that goo is well protected by the bones of your vertebrae and cranium, as well as membrane layers or meninges, before being bathed in a cushy waterbed of clear cerebrospinal fluid. This fluid actually allows your brain to float somewhat in your skull, reducing its weight and letting it slosh around while you and your head are free to move. But even with all that extra protection, your brain is still vulnerable, and one thing that James's story taught us is that its vulnerabilities can be incredibly specific, because your brain is divided into specialized regions that may or may not interact with each other to produce a given action. We can better understand this division of labor by looking at how the brain first develops into its main component parts. Inside a developing embryo, the central nervous system starts off as a humble little neural tube. Soon, the caudal, or lower end of the tube, stretches out, forming the spinal cord, while the cranial end begins to expand, divide, and enlarge into three primary brain vesicles, or interconnected chambers. This is kind of your proto-brain. We call these chambers the prosencephalon, the mesencephalon, and the rhombencephalon, or forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. By an embryo's 5th week of development, these main three chambers start morphing into 5 secondary vesicles that essentially form the roots of what will become your grown-up brain structures. The prosencephalon divides into 2 sections, the telencephalon and the diencephalon. The rhombencephalon forms into another pair called the metencephalon and the myelencephalon. And in between, the mesencephalon, thanks to evolution, remains undivided. The real action starts as these 5 secondary vesicles start developing into the major adult brain regions that you might be more familiar with: the brainstem, the cerebellum, the diencephalon, also known as the interbrain, and finally the cerebral hemispheres. But in order to go from a simple tube into that classic wrinkly icon we think of as the brain, each of these 5 vesicles grows in different ways. Basically, some develop a lot more than others. The least dramatic changes occur in the 3 most caudal or lower sections: the mesencephalon, the metencephalon, and the myelencephalon. They go on to form the cerebellum, which mostly helps coordinate muscular activity, and the brainstem, which plays a vital role in relaying information between the body and the higher regions of the brain. The brainstem actually has 3 main components, and I know this is getting to be a lot of vocabulary here. You have the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. Together, they regulate many of the most basic vital involuntary functions, like keeping your heart on pace, keeping your lungs working, and controlling things like sleep and appetite and pain sensitivity and awareness. But of the 3 brainstem parts, it's your midbrain that carries out the higher level functions. Like when your eyes track a fast-moving object, or when you look behind you after hearing some sudden loud sound. It's the midbrain that receives and processes that sensory information and sends out the reflexive motor signals so you react without thinking. The midbrain also passes that data to regions like the cerebral cortex, which do the actual conscious thinking about the stimuli, like, what is that thing whizzing across the sky, or what just exploded behind me? So with the brainstem and the cerebellum covering your basic life and motor functions, you start to see somewhat more complex tasks being carried out in the next major brain structure, the diencephalon. This is where you find the thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus, and the mammillary bodies, which regulate things like homeostasis, alertness, and reproductive activity. Here we also find part of the limbic system, which is a center for strong emotions like fear. This area is sometimes called the reptilian brain because we share it with some of our less philosophical animal brethren like lizards and fish. I'm not putting these guys down, but by our standards, they don't think so much as focus on the more instinctual pursuits that are ruled by the caudal regions of the brain: eat, drink, sleep, mate, stay safe. All those things are awesome, but it wasn't until the appearance of birds and mammals that some animals' brains came to be dominated by the last of the 5 vesicles, the telencephalon. During your brain's growth, the telencephalon undergoes the biggest changes of all as it develops into the most brainy part of your brain, the 2 classic walnut-looking hemispheres we collectively call the cerebrum that cover the rest of your brain like a mushroom cap on its stalk. That's the cerebrum, not to be confused with Cerebro, which is Professor X's telepathy-enhancing device, and it is the largest region of the brain and performs the highest functions. It's made up of the wrinkled outer layer of gray matter called the cerebral cortex and the inner squishy layer of white matter beneath it. And it's the cerebrum that rules our voluntary movements and our most advanced tricks, like thinking and learning and regulating and recognizing emotions and experiencing consciousness in general. You'll remember that higher processing requires lots of synapses, which require lots of nervous tissues, so as the cerebrum grew through evolutionary time, it got more massive, but our skull didn't exactly keep up. So in order to squeeze all that material into your skull, the brain forms little creases called gyri and larger grooves, or sulci, giving it more folds than an origami pineapple. And although a big fissure separates the left and right hemispheres, the 2 halves communicate through a series of myelinated axon fibers called the corpus callosum. And each hemisphere has other smaller fissures that divide it into lobes, lobes, each with a different set of major functions. The frontal lobe, for example, governs muscle control and cognitive functions like planning for the future, concentration, and preventing socially unacceptable behaviors. In most people, this area doesn't finish developing until after the teenage years, which tells you a lot about the teenage years. Since Broca's area lives in this lobe in the left hemisphere, it also is important in language comprehension and speech. If you're enjoying a beautiful sunset, you can thank your occipital lobe at the back of your head for processing those bright visual cues. And the next time you step on a Lego, you can curse your parietal lobe, which processes the sensations of touch, pain, and pressure. Meanwhile, the temporal lobe helps sort out auditory information, including language. It contains Wernicke's area, another important region of the brain associated with the production of written and spoken language. This part of the limbic system includes your short-term memory keeper, the hippocampus, and the emotional amygdala, which controls sexual and social behavior. So if you damage the wrong part of your temporal lobe, you may never again be able to remember what you ate for lunch, or you might suddenly become a total jerk who kicks kittens and cuts in line. We could do a whole course on the finer-grained functions and consequences of malfunction in every bit of brain in your gourd, but, well, we can't do that today. And you gotta remember that when it comes to your body, no organ or system is an island. Your brain would be pretty useless if it weren't hooked up to the outside world. That's where the peripheral nervous system comes in, which we'll be spending the next few lessons exploring. Meanwhile, you learned today about the central nervous system and how important location is to brain function. We looked at how the brain develops from an unassuming neural tube into 3 primary vesicles and then 5 secondary vesicles, and finally into our complex set of 4 adult structures and their basic functions. Crash Course is now on Patreon. Thank you so much to all of our supporters on Patreon who help make Crash Course possible for themselves and for everyone else in the world through their monthly contributions. If you like Crash Course and you want to help us keep making great new videos like this one, you can check out patreon.com/Crash Course. This episode was written by Kathleen Yale. The script was edited by Blake DiPestino, and our consultant is Dr. Brandon Jackson. It was directed by Nicholas Jenkins and Michael Aranda, and our graphics team is Thought Cafe.
Alright, so we are now on, so at least now ang mga major regions in yung brain, you are at least familiar now with its mga main functions, no? Like the cerebral hemispheres, the 4 major lobes, as well as the brainstem and the cerebellum. So most of these, no, without the proper functioning of these different parts of your brain, no, you would not live you will not be able to live a normal life, no, I mean the daily life that you experience, no. So because of your brain, actually, with the help of the neurons, no, you're able to experience the world around you. So you have those different parts of your brain to thank for. All right, so let's continue now with the next part, no, of our discussion. So yes, so we have now on the sa ani. Okay, so the diencephalon, no? So na mention naman to ni Hank kaganyan sa video, no? Sa naman to mga structures. Actually, mention niya to isa, no, katong limbic system as well as the nalimtan ako dito sa may other one. So we have here the main structures, the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. All right, so here, no, we can see the diencephalon more siya kanang the other name which was described earlier in the video, we call it the interbrain. No? So because it's situated between the because one situated between the 2 hemispheres. No, and as you all know, the both hemispheres are connected by the corpus callosum. Okay, so makita tong corpus callosum this part, no, so kani siya. Okay. So this one connects the 2 hemispheres together. Okay, so let's see, no? Asa diri ang mga parts sa tuwang sa tuwang diencephalon. So we have the thalamus. So we also have the pineal gland. We have the hypothalamus as well. Okay? So all of these are part, no? All of these are part of your diencephalon. And then we have here one of the master glands of our body. We have here the pituitary gland. No? So actually, it's often referred to as kind of what they call one. It's often referred to as the master gland because of the many functions that it manages, like the release of the hormones that will trigger your different characteristics, as well as the hormones that regulate your emotions, regulate your bodily functions, as well as your hunger, etc. Okay. Okay, so thalamus, the hypothalamus, no? So punta nato diri, ato lang siya pasadahan, no? So we have here the hypothalamus regulates your body temperature, water balance, and metabolism. Now the limbic system is the one that is in charge of your emotions, no? Turning my limbics into bouquet. Okay, so we have here um also regulates the nearby pituitary gland and houses the mammillary bodies for olfaction. So olfaction is the scientific term for smelling. Okay, so we also have here the epithalamus, which houses the pineal body, which is also an endocrine gland. Now let's have the brainstem. So for the brainstem, we have the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. So we have here the pons, we have the medulla oblongata. So basically, gimarkahan siya og green, no? So we have the midbrain, the medulla oblongata, and the pons. Okay. So ato lang tanawon ang yang no. Um structure pa man yang una niya, no. So unsa ang yang gina-control. Particularly, the medulla oblongata controls the following: heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, swallowing, and vomiting. Okay, so we also have here in your brainstem the reticular formation, no? We also have here the reticular formation in your midbrain. Okay? Brainstem rather. Okay. So we also have here next part, the cerebrum. Kabalo naman mo, most of its most of your vol- ability to think, which makes us unique from other animals, are found in your cerebrum. Okay? Now, how is your nervous system or the CNS protected? So we have the meninges, the cerebrospinal fluid, and the blood-brain barrier. Okay, for the meninges, we have here the dura mater. The word dura is a Latin word which means hard. No? Hard. It's the outermost leathery layer. It's double layered. So we have the periosteum, and periosteum, di man balik na ba dyan siya sa mga bones, no? So periosteum and the meningeal layer. Okay, so we have the next layer after the dura mater. We have the arachnoid layer. Arachnoid because its shape is like a web. No? So it spans the subarachnoid space to attach it to the pia mater, and then the pia mater is the internal layer which clings to the surface of the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, so makita nato diri ang layers of protection. So we have here the, as you can see here, we have the arachnoid layer, we have the pia mater inside, we have the dura mater. Okay, so it's already beneath the skull, your cranium to be exact. Okay, so this is how it looks like, no? So we have the dura mater here, no? The dura mater, we have the arachnoid mater. Okay? Okay, kuha na ni siya. Gi open, partially open ang ang skull, no? Now, the CSF or the cerebrospinal fluid is ang iyahang composition is just like that of the blood plasma. So it's the liquid it's a well, it's a fluid. It's a liquid in its appearance, no. So it's how or where does it form? It is formed by the choroid plexus, no. So the choroid plexuses are capillaries in the ventricles of the brain. So it forms the watery cushion to protect your brain as what Hank has mentioned earlier in the video. CSF ninyo actually in a way makes your brain float, no? No, it makes your brain float. So circulated in the arachnoid space, ventricles, and then central canal of the spinal cord. All right. So kanang mga blue nga portion are these are ano no where we can usually find the CSF circulating the cerebrospinal fluid. um Sabi to sa akong ano ni klase sa akong remember ani kay kanimi taong the dangers of boxing. And boxing tas is one of the most dangerous ng mga sport, no, kay especially kung ang punch would really hit your head. It could the amount of force exerted upon the one who punched you would actually cause your brain to really kanang ma-shaken, and it actually causes internal bleeding, no. Cause siya og hemorrhage in the long run. Mo rin na nga nagayuban nga murag after hours lang after the match, no, especially kung napurukan ang ulo, usually ma-unconscious, makoma, mamatay, no. So medyo that's why in boxing you should be really careful. No, I mean, for boxers, no, the idea is they should be careful, and of course, no, in their okay, their lives are actually at stake whenever they go to a match. Kay baga ang ilang isa katil kay nasa ang isa katilan nila nasa lubnganan tungod sa danger sila sa ilang activity, sa ilang sa sport nila, no. That's why and as much as your brain is protected by your and as much as your brain is protected by your spinal, I mean your skull, no. As much as it's protected by your skull, your cranium, no. Your brain is a very delicate organ. That's why gani kanang bitaw ni mga wrong lang ang mga moves ang mga neurosurgeons bitaw when they operate your brain, it could actually affect you later in your life. Labi na kung kana mag-undergo bitag operation ng uban biyana kay maglisod ng recover, especially kung if there were mistakes done during the operation. Okay, so another protection of your CNS is your blood-brain barrier. So it allows water, glucose, and amino acids to pass through the capillary walls. So it excludes many potentially harmful substances entering your brain, such as waste, no? So the B, the blood-brain barrier, aside from the CSF, also makes sure that your brain is protected from the entrance of many harmful microorganisms. So some examples of traumatic brain injuries include concussion, contusion, no. Um, Concussion and contusion could actually could uh, cause injury, and this trauma would eventually cause blunt force trauma, kumbaga. Usually labi na kung ganamit akong kusog kayo ang pagkasumbag, no, or kusog kayong pagkabangga sa any hard surface, no, could actually cause concussions and contusions, no. Uban gani ana kay kanang kuan gid, no, kanang maghubag, no, maghubag gid ang part ng brain ko asa ang na naka-strike sa hard surface. So death may occur after head blows due to intracranial hemorrhage and cerebral edema, no. So basin na mga gawon na bang mga alternative career nila boxing. So ayaw, please consider carefully kay while it is uh, Well, it can earn you money. You're also putting your life on the line. Okay. So we also have stroke. So stroke. Stroke happens when there is na block ang area sa brain due to a particular nga sa ang pinaka common ani kay kaning kaning na ay taga ni na blockage kumbaga na usually clot man na nga travel from one part of your body padulong sa brain and ma-block dahil ang flow sa blood towards your brain. So because of that blockage, your brain tissue will die. And depende kung asang area sa yung brain ang maapektuhan, depending on what part of your brain is kanang na block, that could actually alter, no. For example, if your occipital lobe is affected, um if your occipital lobe is affected, what happens is that there will be you will have you or you will experience blindness, or if your speech area is affected, you will have the inability to speak. And ang common pag na kay kanimi taong na yung parts sa inyong brain nga ay parts sa inyong body nga di na ni malihok, no. All right, so here we have the loss of some functions or that may result. Like for example, hemiplegia, which is one-side paralysis, or aphasia, which is the damage to the speech center in the left hemisphere. Then we also have the transient ischemic attack, which can cause numbness, temporary paralysis, and impaired speech. I think na nakita dali nga noon ko certain sa bateran ka baseball sa akong ulo. Oh, kuan ay kaning imodran probably kuan ni siya contusion, no. Contusion kay anam god ni siya kanang nagi siya slight mo bitaw na ay actually kani mga actually dili lang mga boxing but also with kani bitawng martial arts, mixed martial arts, no, MMA. Kani kuan ba kani yung mga very dangerous nga mga sports. Yes, Dran, you were
O ano
nakaon
ba
mo mic.
sir kanang
Yes, Dran.
ka
What happened man?
grabe ito sir katong ka share na lang nako ni kay
Si Dran.
ano gyud katong during man gyud pandemic nag-baseball mi sir ba niya
Oo.
kanang accidentally bitaw kanang sweaty kayo ang kuan sa ako ang kauban so nara ko sa daplin daw kay pag swing niya sa baseball bitaw sir niya kuan ba kanang kahoy bitaw
Oh.
na timing gid siya sir ni igo gid siya sa ako ang frontal diri sa agtang gid sir ba
Uy,
sa kilid
kita ano eh.
kanang pero kuan ba gyud
Unsa man na experience nimo adto after na
ako na experience bitaw na ako adto sir kay kanang
trip?
nakuan kanang nabungog bitaw ko kanang wala gid ako na feel ang environment murag ni dark at that moment ni
Mm,
dark siya tapos na wala na rin ko naka-realize sir nga nag bleeding naman di ay ako ang ulo adto sir
sa gawas?
gawas gid siya sir bleeding gamay lang siya nga scratch pero naggrabe ang intense bleeding ba pero grabe gapadayon ang
Mm.
bungog
Kay probably ang naigo adto dran kay ano to major artery to ang naigo, which is ga supply pod siya og blood no towards your brain, so medyo kuan siya delikado, no.
even gani
Kay
karon abon karon gani sir kay kada bitaw ma-over stress pud ko sir kay ganam siya sa part nga asa ko
mm,
na injured.
nagi na siya magi na siya dara na siya long term effects kay nang muna gid no nga mabitaw pod gid na ang reason why no kay vulnerable bigi kay atong brain. That's why pag mag-drive bitog motor, given gid na dili gid pwede ayaw gid mo drive og motor or ayaw gid mo angkas og motor kung walay helmet. Eh, sorry na lang gyud no, delikado ba gid kayo labi na kung kay kanin labi na kay ang atuang probability of experiencing accidents is dili gyud malikayan no, nagin na nga probability. So always make sure nga ang inyong ulo is protected, no. Even gani kana kita mag earthquake drill ta, no. Mag earthquake drill ta kay ang ulo may sampungan. Eh very important ba yung functions sa tong brain? Dagan kay mga vital functions nga pwede maapektuhan, no. Okay. Next. So the spinal cord. Okay, so it extends on the foramen magnum of the skull. You remember no at katong sa katong nagkwenta sa frog na foramen magnum anto yung gilocate. No? So foramen magnum of the skull to the first or the second lumbar vertebra. So the cauda equina is a collection of spinal nerves in the inferior end. Inferior naasa ubos. Provides a two-way conduction pathway in the 31 pairs of spinal nerves arise from the spinal cord. Okay, so we have here, no? And the spinal cord, muna siya ang iyahang, ang iyahang layers spinal cord. So we have the gray matter, posterior horns, the anterior horns, and the gray matter. Okay. Okay, so muna siyang itsura sa tuwang spinal cord. Oh, of course, no, kailangan po siya protection just like your brain. Okay, now this time, let's go to the peripheral nervous system or the PNS, which consists of nerves and the ganglia outside the central nervous system. So let's have the second video here by Hank Gyapon. So salamat kita kay Hank to because of the okay, sorry. Okay, so we have this one. Allow me to share my screen once more.
When it comes to the nervous system, or just your body in general, let's face it, your brain gets all the props. And it deserves those props. It's a complicated and crucial and sometimes crazy boss of an organ. But your brain would be pretty useless without a support team that kept it connected to the outside world. Because frankly, like any leader, the more isolated your brain gets, the weirder it gets. Put a person in a watery, pitch-black sensory deprivation tank and you'll see the brain do some really weird stuff. Without a constant flood of external information, the brain starts to confuse its own thoughts for actual experiences, leading you to hallucinate the taste of cheeseburgers or the sound of a choir singing or the sight of pink stampeding elephants. It's your peripheral nervous system that keeps things real by putting your brain in touch with the physical environment around you and allowing it to respond. This network snakes through just about every part of your body, providing the central nervous system with information ranging from the temperature to the touch of a hand on your shoulder to a twisted ankle. The peripheral nervous system's sensory nerve receptors spy on the world for the central nervous system, and each type responds to different kinds of stimuli. Thermoreceptors respond to changes in temperature, photoreceptors react to light, chemoreceptors pay attention to chemicals, and mechanoreceptors respond to pressure, touch, and vibration. And then we've got specialized nerve receptors called nociceptors that, unlike those other receptors, fire only to indicate pain, which is the main thing I want to talk about today. Because as unpleasant as a stick in the eye or attack of the foot may be, pain is actually a great example of where everything we've talked about over the last few weeks all comes together as we trace a pain signal through your nervous system, from the first cuss to the Hello Kitty Band-Aid. By the end of this episode of Crash Course Anatomy and Physiology, you'll never think of a stubbed toe, pounding headache, or burned tongue the same way again. Most people go to great lengths to avoid pain, but really, it's an incredibly useful sensation because it helps protect us from ourselves and from the outside world. If you're feeling physical pain, it probably means that your body is under stress, damaged, or in danger, and your nervous system is sending a cease and desist signal to stop you from twisting your arm like that, or to back away from the bonfire, or please seek medical attention, like right now. So in that way, pain is actually good for you. That's why it exists. I'm not saying it's pleasant, but if you've ever wished for an X-Men-like power to be impervious to pain, I gotta say, that is one foolish monkey's paw of a wish. Just ask Ashlyn Blocker. She's got a genetic mutation that's given her a total insensitivity to any kind of pain, and as a result, she's absent-mindedly dunked her hands in pots of boiling water, run around for days without noticing broken bones, and nearly chewed off her own tongue. Luckily, such congenital conditions are very rare. The rest of us have a whole nervous system dedicated to making sure our bodies react with a predictable chain of events at the first sign of damage. Like, say you just wake up and you're extraordinarily hungry for some reason, so you run downstairs to grab some clam chowder, but you didn't put any shoes on, and suddenly you're like, yeah! There's a tack, fell onto the wall, and you stepped right on it, of course. Your foot immediately lifts off the ground, and then you're assuring your dog that you're not yelling at her, you're just yelling, and then you limp over to the couch and sit down and pull up your foot and remove the spiny devil from your flesh. You want to talk physiology? So what exactly just happened in your body? Well, the first step was a change in your environment. That is, a stimulus that activated some of your sensory receptors. In this case, it was a change from the probably completely ignored feeling of bare skin on a smooth floor to a distinct feeling of discomfort, the sharp metal tack piercing your skin. Your peripheral nervous system's mechano and nociceptors provided that base sensation or awareness that something had changed. Then it went to your central nervous system, first to the spinal cord that caused the immediate reflexive action of pulling up your foot, and then your brain eventually interpreted that awareness into the perception of pain and decided to pull the tack out and probably say an expletive or two. Pain itself is a pretty subjective feeling, but the fact is, we all have the same pain threshold. That is, the point where a stimulus is intense enough to trigger action potentials in those nociceptors is the same for everybody. But you and I might have different tolerances for discomfort. In general, most doctors think of pain as the perception of pain, whatever any given brain says pain is. So you got the stimulating event, foot meets tack, and then you got the reception of that signal as the nociceptors in your foot sense that stimulus, and then the transmission of that signal through your nerves to your spinal cord and eventually up to the brain. Now, remember back how every neuron in your body has a membrane that keeps positive and negative charges separated across its boundaries, like a battery sitting around waiting for something to happen. Well, that tack in your flesh is that something, and it snaps those nociceptors to attention. Some neurons have mechanically gated receptors that respond to a stretch in their membranes. In this case, that happens when the tack punches through them. Meanwhile, other neurons have ligand-gated receptors that open when the damaged skin tissue releases chemicals like histamine or potassium ions. These channels allow sodium ions to flood into the neuron, causing a graded potential. If that hits the right threshold, it activates the electrical event that sends the signal all the way up the axon and gets one neuron talking to another, the action potential. When that action potential races down the length of its axon to the terminal, the message hits the synapse that then flings it over that synaptic gap to another neuron that's in your spinal cord. Remember, signals travel between neurons either by electrical or chemical synapses. The electrical ones send an electrical impulse, while the chemical ones, the ones I'm talking about right now, first convert that signal from electrical to chemical by activating neurotransmitters to bridge the synaptic gap before the receiving neuron converts that chemical signal back into an electrical one. In this case, news of the tack attack is carried by specific neurotransmitters whose sole job is to pass along pain messages. Now, so far your body's response to the stimulus has been handled by the sensory or afferent division of your peripheral nervous system. This is the part that's involved expressly in collecting data and sending it to the central nervous system. But at this point, the responsibility changes hands. The torch is passed because the pain signal has just triggered an action potential in a neuron in the spinal cord, which is part of the central nervous system, and there it reaches an integration center. From here, the response is taken over by the motor or efferent division. Once the integration center interprets the signal, it transmits the message to motor neurons, which send an action potential back down your leg where it reaches an effector. And An effector is just any structure that receives and reacts to a motor neuron signal, like a muscle contracting or a gland secreting a hormone. From here, the motor neurons complete the whole foot lifting response until the rest of your nervous system gets engaged in the complicated tasks of figuring out what the problem is and fixing it. Those are the 5 steps that your highly specific neural pathways go through to produce what's known as a reflex arc. A lot of your body's control systems boil down to reflexes just like this. Immediate reactions that can either be innate or learned, but don't need much conscious processing in the brain. Lifting your foot when you step on a tack is an innate or intrinsic reflex action, a super fast motor response to a startling stimulus. These reflexes are so invested in your self-preservation that you actually can't think about them before you respond. All this processing happens in the spinal cord so that the control of the muscles can be initiated before the pain is actually perceived by the brain. Learned or acquired reflexes, on the other hand, come from experience, like how you learn to dodge obstacles while riding a bike or driving a car. That process is also largely automatic, but you learn those reflexes by spending time behind the wheel or behind the handlebars. And reflex arcs stimulate some muscles while inhibiting others. For example, the tack in your right foot ended up activating the motor neurons in your right hip flexors and hamstring, causing your knee to bend and your foot to lift up. But it also told the quad muscles in your left leg to extend and stand tall, allowing you to shift your body's weight off the tack. Of course, not all reflexes come from pain, as you've probably experienced when a doctor tapped your knee and your foot kicked. Your muscles and tendons are very sensitive to being stretched too far or too fast because that kind of movement can cause injury. So for this, we have receptors called muscle and tendon spindles that specifically sense stretching. If triggered by an overstretch, they generate a reflex arc that contracts the muscle to keep it from stretching further. So, when does the brain actually get involved in all this? Well, when your spinal cord sent impulses down the motor neurons, it also sent signals up your spinal cord toward the brain. News of the attack arrived first at your thalamus, the information switchboard that then split the message and sent it to the somatosensory cortex, which identifies and localizes the pain, like sharp and foot, as well as the limbic system, which registers emotional suffering, like, why, Tack, why me? And it also went to the frontal cortex, which made sense of it all, assigning meaning to the pain, like, oh, I see, this Tack fell from the crash course poster on the wall here. So basically, although your body has been reacting all along, it's not until those pain signals hit the brain that you have the conscious thoughts of both, dang, that hurt, and, oh, that hurt because I stepped on a specific pointy thing. And this is where I want to point out that we here at Crash Course cannot be held responsible for any injuries sustained in the process of owning a Crash Course poster. Enjoy them at your own risk. Today, you got your first look at the peripheral nervous system by learning how the afferent and efferent divisions provide information about and responses to pain. You learned about the 5 steps of the reflex arc, the different kinds of reflexes you have, and what your brain has to say about all that pain once the news is finally broken to it. Crash Course is now on Patreon. A big thanks to all of our supporters on Patreon who make Crash Course possible for themselves and for the whole rest of the world.
Alright, so medyo taas-taas pag itag ano, no? Unfortunately, we're about to end, no? So we'll try to Wednesday pa man pod. Sa Wednesday day class nung ato ang quiz will only be chapter 7, no? Chapter 7 na atong quiz sa Wednesday sa lab. And then after that one, we will finish it with the discussion on chapter 8. Now, dili ko dili sa nako bali I will not cut chapter 7 today, but we will continue this one on Tuesday. O sa Tuesday ta mag-continue. So the last part of our discussion, medyo taas ito sa nervous system, no? The last part of the nervous system will be discussed on Tuesday because of the ano no, kanang napatay mga important parts like ang other parts of the other divisions. We will still discuss the importance of the other divisions such as the autonomic and the somatic nervous system and the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. Okay, so um just a final note lang, no, before we end. May I know if you have already checked the guidelines of your PIT, if you have any concerns or clarifications regarding your midterm PIT. Na-check na did you check it already sa tuwang sa tuwang Facebook group? Kita na ba ninyo to?
Yes, sir.
Nakita naman ninyo, no? So, mag-remind lang ko again sa inyong assignment. Ako lang siya ang screen. I'll just share with you this one. Okay lang pas ha. Okay, let me know if you can see the screen. Makita na ba ninyo ang Kita naman yung class?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so again ha, mag-remind ko nga duha ka buok ang yes French question.
Excuse me, sir.
Mm.
Tanong ako regarding sa models ba? For
Ha,
example, pa mo magod nga mag-interactive model, sir. And dakon kung
di
unsa
sa
ka
French kay
detail ang
murag
among model bitaw.
dili kay clear yung tingog.
Okay. Kani, sir.
Sige sige, try daw.
Hello? Audible
Oh,
ako, sir?
okay na, medyo arang-arang na.
Okay. So, kanang plano may nga mag-interact ang model, sir, pero galibog ko kung sa ang pambit kung sa siya ka-detailed. So, since ang amuaman, sir, kay respiratory and na respiratory sa grade 9, sir, so kung ang level of difficulty lang level sa or ka-detail sa amuang model, sir, kay depende
Ang
siya sa kung saan naa sa grade 9 ng mga lesson lang, sir,
mm,
no? Okay.
exactly. Kana lang siya French. Ayaw na kayo mo og dive into the like inyo pa explain. Pwede man gyapon ninyo explain nga unsa ang connection ni pwede ganin ninyo establish ang connection ni circulatory ug respiratory because in the alveoli that is where the gas exchange happens, no? And it's connected with the circulatory system. It's because ang atoang alveoli contains blood vessels or capillaries to be particular that actually facilitates the gas exchange, no? So pwede diha lang nga level French. Dili na kayo ta magkuan like for example no like ang katog yung detail kay nga anatomy. Ang focus lang gid ninyo is how you will be able to teach interactively the topic to grade 9 students. Okay? Okay na French?
Yes, sir. Thank you
Oh,
po.
so you can create an interactive model, no? Na one lugar butang na to no sa lugar may tabo sa lungs no makita lugar nila mo expand ang lungs no, so depende na unsa nga model ang inyong gamiton or unsa nga mga materials yung gamiton for the model. Okay, other questions. This is not dili mo ang sorry dili mo ang dili mo ang document ka ko na share. This is okay wait lang klasa. Just open very quickly the other document nga akong ah muna ni siya. Mm. Allow me to share very quickly. So muna ni siya class ha. Okay, so nakabota na po dire ang inyong so muna itong schedule sa presentation. It's on March 19, no? So mag-open lang ko Google Doc, I mean Google Sheet. Dito na you indicate ang inyong time slot for the presentation, no? So the presentation will happen here in the office, no? So you'll be accommodated may pila man mo ka group. So butang na to kung 15 minutes per group. Pwede ta sa afternoon, Monday afternoon for that one. I mean, Monday afternoon, March 19 in the afternoon. Okay? So, ang din, muna din siya ang inyong rubric. By the way, the template for the lesson plan ako pa siyang i-share ninyo. Okay? So, kay para ma-create ninyo as well. Kay during your prior to your presentation, you're going to submit your lesson plan as well as your pitch. Okay? Pitch nga document. So, that's it, no? That's for your PIT. Unless if you have other questions or clarifications. Okay na?
Sir, fix na gid
Yes,
ng
Duran.
March 19, sir, kay so kuan man gid ka ng March 17 ug 18 exam man gud kay sir niya. Grabe
Lagi,
kayo
sir.
ka kuan sir ba kanang mental kuan kay sir, draining kaayo sir. After
Hindi
exam
ka
pag
study, sir.
oh,
Sige. Sige lato. I will consider your appeal. Alam sa nato. Okay? Kaya ano man pod good class, the reason pod why I have set those days for your presentation is because kana pod nga days kuan mi taga na kana nga days is kuan mi kanang we are also checking your outputs, no? So ako sa tanawon kung what will work better, pwede siguro nga i-move pa nato one day further. Pwede nato mag-start ta sa 20, 21, 22. Istagwan natay mag-allot kog one day per section. Kay dili pod na ako makaya nga accommodate mo tanan in just one sitting. Isa lang ka adlaw brag. Ako pod ang ma-drain. So as much as possible po no let's I'll try to consider your but let's keep it balanced, okay? Pwede siguro i-move lang ako siya one day, 20 ta magsugod, and then 20, 21, 22. Okay? And then mag-send lang ko og document, I mean Google Sheets for the Google Sheets for the barag reservation of your time slot. Kay kamo akong pabuto no kung sa mo mag-present, no. So anyway, your presentation will only be for 7 minutes, and the rest of the time, the remaining 8 minutes will be intended for your it's intended for your Q&A. So if na available nga faculty diri, kung kinsang available kung kuan, they could also ask you questions, no? So probably kung na si Sir Jello diri, si Ma'am Merlin, si Ma'am Faith, Ma'am Beth, Sir Ronnie, all all of them could also ask questions, no? Kay it's also intended for the improvement of your model, and ano pa siya, o unsa ang mga elements nga dapat i-incorporate sa model ninyo. So expect that kung kinsa nga faculty ang present during that time, aside from me, of course, no, they will also ask you questions for the refinement of your model. Okay? Okay na ba ta? Hey, sure ko, Sir Ronnie will be waiting for you for your next class. So Ron, kuan mo karon? Online mo? Okay. Sige, nagulat na si excited na ni si Sir Ronnie magklase ninyo. Okay, so anyway, so thank you so much class for attending today's session, no? And let's see each other again on Tuesday. We will wrap up nervous system, and then